بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين والعاقبة للمتقين، والصلاة والسلام على عبده ورسوله وخليله وصفوته من خلقه نبينا وإمامنا وسيدنا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه ومن سلك سبيله واهتدى بهداه إلى يوم الدين. أما بعد. We're on the nullifiers of wudu. And the author said, وَالنَّوَاقِضُ فِي الطَّهَارَةِ الصُّغْرَى ثَمَانِيَةٌ. There's 8 nullifiers of wudu. The first one is الْخَارِجُ مِنَ السَّبِيلَيْنِ. Anything that exits from the 2 private parts. Then the second nullifier of wudu is وَالْفَاحِشُ مِنْ غَيْرِهِمَا. What's repulsive that exits from other than the 2 private parts. The third nullifier of wudu is وَزَوَالُ الْعَقْلِ بِغَيْرِ نَوْمٍ يَسِيرٍ جَالِسًا أَوْ قَائِمًا. Loss of consciousness nullifies wudu, and similar to it, ruling-wise, is sleep, unless it's light sleep while the person is sitting or standing. That's the opinion of the author, but we explained and elaborated on that. The fourth nullifier of wudu is وَمَسُّ الْفَرْجِ. And that's what we began on last class. وَمَسُّ الْفَرْجِ. The first mas'ala we took is about a male touching his sexual organ, touching the penis. We took that first mas'ala. The mas'ala we'll start on today, inshallah, is a female, a woman, touching her sexual organ. Does it have the same hukum as a man, or is it different? And there's 3 opinions on this mas'ala. The first opinion is the opinion of the Shafi'iyya and Hanabila, one of 3 opinions of the Malikiyya. And it's the opinion Ibn Qudama in Al-Mughni selected, in that it nullifies wudu. They use the hadith in Musnad Ahmad and also in الدارقطني and Al-Bayhaqi عن عمرو بن شعيب عن أبيه عن جده قال قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم أيما رجل مس فرجه فليتوضأ وأيما امرأة مست فرجها فلتتوضأ. Any man who touches his private part must make wudu, and any woman who touches her private organ must make wudu. At-Tirmidhi rahimahullah said that Al-Bukhari rahimahullah said that that hadith is authentic. Al-Dhahabi said it's authentic, and Ibn Hajar stated that it was Hasan. They also use some other weak hadith. There's no need to go over them. The second opinion is that a woman touching her sexual organ does not nullify the wudu. This is the opinion mainly of the Hanafiya. A second opinion of the Malikiyya, and it's the main opinion of their madhab, and it's also a second opinion of the Hanabila. So mainly it's the Hanafiya who adopted this opinion, with a second opinion for both Malikiyya and Hanabila. They use the rationale that we mentioned several times for several purposes, and we'll mention it again and again inshallah. And here Ibn Qudama mentioned it. He said the origin is that tahara is established. And when tahara is established, it remains valid unless there's clear proof, a solid, authentic proof or ijma' for a nullifier. And here there is no solid proof on that, because all the proofs are disputed, he said. They also said the hadith ordering wudu was for men, and it's due to the possibility of a discharge. Unlike a woman, it's different than a woman. And the answer to that stipulation that it's due to a discharge has no proof to back it up. The wudu is not due to a discharge. If it was so, we would say touching the private part does not nullify wudu unless there's a discharge. The hadith is for simply touching, without the stipulation of desire or the stipulation of discharge. The third hadith they use is hadith Talq ibn Ali. And they said touching the private part doesn't require wudu. They compared women to a man. And we said that hadith is weak. Then you have the opinion that some Malikiya said it nullifies the wudu. A woman touching her sexual organ nullifies the wudu if she touches it with desire. The selected opinion is that women touching their sexual organ nullifies wudu because it was established for men, as we mentioned, and the ruling applies to women just as much because إِنَّمَا النِّسَاءُ شَقَائِقُ الرِّجَالِ. Women are of the same nature of men. Matters like these, the ruling pertaining to men apply to women unless there is proof to show they're different. It's also strengthened by analogy, as it appears there's no difference between a man and a woman. And also the hadith of Amr ibn Shu'ayb. So last week we took a man touching his private part. Then we started off today with a woman touching her sexual organ. The third mas'ala under وَمَسُّ الْفَرْجِ is if a spouse touches the private part of another spouse. The husband touching the private part of his wife, or the wife touching the private part of her husband. And what also falls under this mas'ala to keep in mind is something like a parent or caretaker touching the private part of the infant or child while they're cleaning them or changing their diapers or bathing them. And like that is someone who may work in a facility like a nursing home where it's urgent to do something like that. So the first opinion is that it doesn't nullify wudu. That's the opinion of the Hanafiya and Zahiriya. They said the rationale that we mentioned. Once tahara is established, it doesn't get nullified without an ijma' or solid proof. And here there's no proof to indicate that the wudu is nullified. They also used as proof the hadith of Talq ibn Ali, that touching the private part, one's own private part, doesn't nullify wudu. They said the same about touching someone else's. And but we said that hadith is weak. Third of all, they said the hadith ordering wudu from touching the private part, like hadith Busra bin Safwan, they said if we're going to use them, they're about a person touching their own private parts, not touching someone else's private part. And then they also used, which is the fourth proof that they used, is a weak hadith. There's no need to mention it, but I'll mention it because it's popular in other contexts and it's used by the enemies of Allah. Some of the enemies of Allah, they said, كنا عند رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم فجاء الحسن فأقبل يتبرغ عليه فرفع عن قميصه وقبل زبيبته. That the Messenger صلى الله عليه وسلم lifted the shirt of Al-Hasan and kissed the private part of Al-Hasan. Some of the enemies of Allah use it for certain matters, and that has 4 narrations to it. All of them are weak. So you need to keep in mind that it's a weak hadith. The reason I mentioned it is to know that it's a weak hadith. The second opinion is that touching the private part of someone else nullifies the wudu. That's the opinion of the Shafi'iyya and the Hanabila. They use hadith Busra bint Safwan, but they used a different narration of it. That she heard the Messenger ﷺ ordering wudu from touching the private part. سمعت النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم يأمر بالوضوء من مس الفرج. No, this narration of hadith Busra is worded slightly different. The narration of this hadith that we took ordered wudu from one touching his own private parts. That's what we took in our last class. Here, in this narration, it's worded as from touching private parts, not limited to touching your own private parts. Touching a private part. And this narration here is shadh. It's weak. It's shadh. And a shadh is the narration of a trustworthy person that contradicts the narration of a person or people who are more reliable. The correct, authentic narration of Hadith Busra is the one we took last week or last class. مَنْ مَسَّ ذَكَرَهُ فَلْيَتَوَضَّأ. The second proof they used is what Ibn Qudama said. He gave the rationale in support of this. He said, if one's wudu is nullified when he touches his own sexual organ, and he needs to do wudu, while at times there's need that arises where a person needs to touch their own sexual organ. They said it's awla and prioritize that touching someone else's private part nullifies that person's wudu. And the answer to that is that this is a matter of ta'abbud. The illah or reason for nullifying wudu is that it's a matter of ibadah. In many matters of ibadah we can't explain. We do it as a ibadah without the need of rationales or stating that it's because of discharge or that it's because of desire. It's a matter of ibadah. We do it because we're ordered, just like we do the Maghrib 3 rak'at, the Isha 4 rak'at. The third opinion is that touching someone else's private part nullifies the wudu of the person who touched, and it's only if it's with desire. This is one of the opinions of the Malikiyyah. The Rajih is that it doesn't nullify the wudu except when one touches their own private parts, because it's a matter of ibadah, and that's how the hadith is worded: man massa dhakarahu, his own private part, falyatawadda. It states touching one's own private part. The other narration that's broad in touching a private part is, as we said, weak. And if that applies to a wife touching her husband or husband touching the wife and the adults, like I said, it applies to touching children while cleaning them or changing their diaper or bathing them. Likewise, someone who urgently needs to do so, like caretakers in nursing home facilities. The next mas'ala, that's for touching someone else's private part, the person who's touching. Now the mas'ala is the person who was touched. Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah related that there's an ijma' that one whose private sexual organ is touched, his wudu is not nullified. The point that it's not a nullifier of wudu is correct, but the ijma' may not be fully accurate, because some Malikiyyah mentioned in an opinion that one whose sexual organ is touched in desire by someone else, that their wudu gets nullified. The opinion of Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah ta'ala that it doesn't nullify is correct. And it's correct because the hadith on touching is not about the one being touched. We don't go beyond the proof in a matter of ibadah. The proof doesn't mention another person being touched, and that other person's wudu gets nullified. So we stick to the hadith. The hadith is worded about one touching his own sexual organ, and we stick to that. It's a ibadah matter, and we stick to the clear wording of the proof. This, of course, has nothing to do with the matter that if there's a discharge. That's a totally different topic. If there's a discharge. And of course, that if there's a discharge, that nullifies wudu. But that's not the issue at hand right now. Another mas'ala is what about touching the buttocks? And when we mention the buttocks, we're talking about specifically the rectum. The first opinion, that it doesn't nullify wudu. And that's the opinion of the Hanafiya, Malikiya, Zahiriya, one of the opinions of the Hanabila. They used hadith Talq ibn Ali. Hadith Talq ibn Ali, the one where the messenger supposedly said, it's only a part of you, like any part of your body. And they said the buttocks are like the sexual organ, that you don't have to make wudu for either. We said the hadith is weak. The second and more important proof is they said the order to do wudu was for touching the male sexual organ, al-dhakar, the penis, not the rear. And the origin is that tahara remains intact and doesn't get nullified unless there's clear, authentic, solid proof, and there's no proof to include the rectum. The second opinion is that they said it nullifies the wudu. That's the opinion of the Shafi'iyya and the Hanabila, and it's the opinion Shawkani rahimahullah chose. They use the hadith that we mentioned earlier. أيما رجل مس فرجه فليتوضأ وأيما امرأة مست فرجها فلتتوضأ. The term used in the hadith that a person must make wudu, farj, they said encompasses the rectum, and it encompasses the male and female sexual organ. The first opinion is more correct, that it doesn't nullify the wudu. The hadith, the second opinion used, that farj includes both private parts, is more correctly defined as a male or female sexual organ, not the bottom, not the rectum. And keep in mind, this mas'ala, this dispute pertains to touching the rectum, not the buttocks. The buttocks themselves, touching them, doesn't nullify a wudu. There's no dispute on that. It doesn't nullify wudu. The dispute here is pertaining to the rectum. The final mas'ala for today is touching the testicles. Touching the testicles doesn't nullify the wudu according to all four imams. Why? Because there's no proof for it. The only opinion I know of, the only alleged opinion I know of, is the opinion attributed to Urwa ibn Zubayr because of a hadith. And the hadith is in Ad-Daraqutni. The hadith is related by Busra, that she heard the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "Man massa dhakarahu aw unthayayhi aw rufghayhi falyatawadda wudu'ahu lis-salah." That hadith is related by Busra, and it specified that one must make wudu when touching the testicles. And Nawawi said it's fabricated. And Ad-Daraqutni said the addition of testicles is worded from the wording of Urwa, not from the statement of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. In a different narration, Urwa radiallahu anh mentioned touching the sexual organ nullifies wudu, and he attributed that to the Messenger. Separately, in that narration, separately and clearly from his own wording, he added the testicles. That one, Ad-Daraqutni said, was authentic. So the bottom line is, because there's no proof, just like we said about the rectum, just because there's no proof, we say that touching the rectum or the testicles does not nullify the wudu, because it's a matter of ibadah. There's no proof that indicates that touching them nullifies the wudu. Let's take a recap on what we took, because we took many masail. We took the mas'ala of a man touching his sexual organ. We stated that nullifies the wudu. We took the mas'ala of a woman touching her sexual organ. We said that nullifies the wudu. Male or female who touch their sexual organ without a barrier, it's not over the clothes, need to make wudu. It nullifies the wudu. Whether it's with desire or not, whether there's discharge or not. Touching itself, bare touching, is sufficient to nullify the wudu. The third mas'ala is a spouse touching the private part of their husband, touching the wife, or the wife touching the husband's private part. And we said that does not nullify the wudu of the one touching. The fourth mas'ala is the one being touched. And we said the rajih is that the one being touched, their wudu is not nullified for lack of proof on these matters. And the fifth mas'ala is touching the rectum. We said it doesn't nullify wudu because it's a matter of ibadah. We need proof on it. There isn't. The sixth mas'ala is touching the testicles, and we said that also doesn't nullify wudu because there's no proof, clear, authentic proof to specify that it nullifies the wudu. And with this we'll conclude. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم.